Hey guys, how's it going? So this week's topic placed second in the community poll behind last week's video on why your notes don't speak, which you can find in the card right here. But I wanted to go ahead and follow that up with this video, which is about modal scale cycles. Now, while the phrase modal scale cycles sounds pretty fancy, it's actually really straightforward. It is a cool way to mix up your typical scale routine and make you listen to your intonation in different ways to improve both your pitch center as well as your ear at the same time. But before we jump in, I wanted to gauge some opinions on a new form of content I've been thinking about doing. My passion beyond bass playing lies in video games. I had this idea to analyze video game music with the lens of why it is so effective for a particular game or franchise, or even a specific in-game situation. I do already have one idea in the works, so drop me a like on this video if that's something you think would be cool to see, and leave me a comment if there's a particular game or franchise that you think would be cool to look at. Now, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive in. So for a long time, actually, anytime someone would mention something about modes, I would just kind of smile and nod and pretend I knew what they were talking about because I didn't want to be embarrassed in front of my peers for not knowing what they were. I don't really want to assume anything about what you, the viewer, already know or don't know. So if you're already pretty familiar about how modes work, you can go ahead and skip to the timestamp here to jump right to how I use modes to practice my scales. If you're not sure how modes work, or you might like a refresher, then stay right where you are, grab a drink of choice, let's talk about modes. So what are modes? Modes are essentially scales that have different melodic characteristics. In other words, we already know that major and minor scales, for example, have different flavors, so to speak, and this is no different. In fact, today we're going to be talking specifically about modes based on the major scale, but there are also modes to be built on other scales, like the minor scale. To build modes on the major scale, we're essentially going to be starting a scale on each scale degree of the major scale. I feel like I should count the number of times I say scale in this video. So just take a simple C major scale, for example, and you've created your first mode called ionian. This is just a fancy way of describing a scale built on the first scale degree, the first note of the scale. Now, if we keep the same key signature for C major and start the scale on the second scale degree instead, on D, we've created the next mode called dorian. Scale degree 3 is phrygian, 4 is lydian, 5 is mixolydian, 6 is aeolian, and 7 is locrian. Congratulations! We've learned all the modes. Okay, just kidding, there is a little bit more to look at here. That was a really oversimplified way of describing modes, so let's go ahead and dig a little bit deeper. If we stick with our example of C major, building a scale on scale degree 1 gives us ionian, the major scale, and starting on the second scale degree gives us dorian. Cool, we already know that. But what if instead of going up the major scale and keeping the same set of notes every time, I stayed on C and shifted the mode? In that case, we know that dorian is built on the second scale degree. So if C is the first note in our scale, what major scale has C as the second note? That's right, it's B flat major. So to play C dorian, we're going to play a B flat major scale, but start on C. Phrygian is built on the third scale degree. Same process as before. A flat major has C as the third scale degree, so you'd play an A flat major scale starting on C. Continuing in this fashion, C Lydian is based in G major, C mixolydian in F, C aeolian in E flat major. Fun fact, this is the same as the C natural minor scale because C minor is the relative minor to E flat major. The more you know. And C locrian is based on D flat major. Notice how each one of these scales has a different flavor to it. Some of them sound really stable, while others are very much unstable. This instantly gives us as musicians a multitude of different melodic colors that we can produce, all centered around the concept of using major scales and their modes. I know that, especially if this is your first time hearing all of this, it can be a lot to take in, so sometimes it can take a few passes at it, but once it clicks, it'll be super easy. Once you get cozy with understanding how all this works, it's time to move to phase 2, which involves understanding these modal relationships in an additional way. So by now, we understand how to relate each mode based on its scale degree. Another way I like to understand modes is how they relate to their major scale foundation. Let's take a look. For the Ionian mode, there are no changes. This is a major scale. For Dorian, we're going to take the major scale and we're going to lower the third and lower the seventh. Alternatively, you could view it as a natural minor scale with a raised 6 instead. For Phrygian, we're going to take the major scale and we're going to lower the second, third, sixth, and seventh scale degrees. Alternatively, you could look at it as a natural minor scale with a lowered second. For Lydian, we're going to take a major scale and raise the 4. For mixolydian, take your major scale and lower the 7th. For aeolian, take your major scale and lower 3, 6, and 7. Or just think of it as your regular old natural minor scale. For locrian, take your major scale and lower 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7. Or think of your natural minor scale and lower 2 and 5. Understanding all of this and recalling it instantaneously will take a little bit of time, but as with anything, practicing this stuff consistently will make things much easier. As a way to practice your memory, try randomly picking a note and a mode. For example, E-flat Lydian or A-sharp Locrian. See how quickly you can put together how that mode is constructed. Trust me, it will get really easy really quickly, and if it's not coming to you supernaturally, consider just going back to the beginning and working through all this stuff again until it makes a bit more sense. However, now that we have our foundational understanding of modes, we're all set and ready to apply these to our scale practicing. Now, while I do practice my major scales every day with bowing variations, more on that in a future video, so be sure to get subscribed. I like to do the following exercise with modes to really hone in on my intonation. I'm going to start by setting a drone pitch for reference. Here I'm using the track Cello Drones that you can find for free on Spotify, but any device or app or track or whatever that provides a consistent drone pitch will work great for this. Basically what I'm going to be doing is playing all of the major scale modes over a reference pitch that have that pitch as their root. So we'll start with the Ionian mode, and in this example I'm going to be using D-flat major because fun! As you would normally when practicing your scales, listen for each interval and the relationship it has to the root. I'm going to go full out on this and play 3-octave scales like I normally do every day over each mode. If you're like me, however, and you have the attention of a goldfish whenever you're watching YouTube, feel free to navigate around the various modes using the timestamps in the video description. As you listen to each mode, be thinking about a word to describe the flavor of each one. If you find one that you like in particular, let me know down in the comments. Next, we'll play D-flat Dorian. And unless you want to think of the key of C flat major, which doesn't sound like a good time for anyone, I'm going to go ahead and respell that to C sharp Dorian, and we'll base this on the B major scale. Keep listening to where those perfect intervals, thirds and sixths, as well as unisons line up with the reference pitch. Phrygian is where things start to get more interesting. I'll be playing essentially an A major scale starting on C sharp. That means that the second note in the scale is a lowered 2, only a half step away, meaning that the second interval you hear will be a minor second. Crunchy. This is where the nice benefits of this exercise really start coming through. We get to tune that minor second. Also, listen to how much the flavor of the mode changes when we go to Phrygian. Lydian will be A flat major starting on D flat. This one features a tritone. Mixolydian will be G flat major starting on D flat. Aeolian is E major starting on C sharp or a C sharp natural minor scale. Locrian is a D major scale starting on C sharp. This one is definitely the crunchiest of the lot, featuring a minor second as well as a tritone. Well guys, that's going to do it for this one. Let me know if you found this method of practicing scales useful, or if this was you finally learning to understand what modes are all about or something. Also, if you think that my new genre of content would be something of interest to you, leave me a like, get get subscribed, and let me know in the comments if there's a particular game or franchise that you think would be cool to dive into. As always, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, happy practicing.